Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first UNT Dallas Respond Speaker Series. My name is Dr. Jamaica Chappell, and I will serve as our moderator for today's discussion. Before we get started with our discussion today, we invite President Mong to provide some opening remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Chappell. This is an important time. Thanks to each of you for joining us for this first of 4 focused conversations aimed at helping our university community, our students, our staff, our faculty, and the community we serve explore how current social unrest is impacting us. We ask ourselves, what can we do to make sense of what is happening? We ask ourselves, how can we traverse these troubling and deep cross currents? We ask ourselves, what can we do to create a better and more just society? In other words, how can we act now to make tomorrow better than today? We are a caring and diverse university community, one of the most diverse in America, and we are justly proud of our diversity. We also remind ourselves that Texas is the most diverse state in America if you are 24 and younger. These demographics don't change. They don't change over time. What this means is that our students are preparing to become the future leaders of this state. Our students want and deserve true lasting cultural change. They are preparing themselves to live, work, and participate in a nation they expect to be free of prejudice and hate. And they are here because they realize education provides them with the tools to a better future. We are troubled as a community by the senseless deaths of countless men and women of color, now and over the span of our history. These deaths are deeply felt and spur us all to seek lasting change. Thank you. Dr. Chappell.
Thank you, President Mong, for those welcoming remarks. Just for those who are participating and watching today, we will be taking some questions at the end of the discussion. We encourage you all to utilize the question and answer area and to provide those questions, and we'll get to those at the end. So to get us started, I'll say this: anger, disappointment, betrayal, mistrust, sadness, disgust. So many feelings experienced as the generational misgivings of social injustice have gravely impacted our country and our lives time and time again. In order for a healing process to begin, one must be able to identify, what is it? Or what are the things that keep me from being whole again? Healing, restoration, and resilience begin first by calling a thing and having the courage to want something new, better, safer, and in order to have a new sense of normalcy and well-being, it's our effort to try to have some semblance of moving forward. For those of you joining us today, I say to you that systemic racism is real. It occurs daily in our communities, in our professional and social circles, in areas of law and order, and government and policy. One only needs the courage not to embrace the eyes wide shut mentality. So how do we cope? How do we heal? How do we channel our pain, our anger, our frustration, and turn that into promise, giving us the sense of being whole again. Well, that's why we are here today, and we're going to get into that. Joining me today is Desmond Burton. Desmond is a student veteran who served 8.5 years in the military as an infantry sergeant with 2 combat tours, one to Iraq and another in Afghanistan. He was medically discharged and came to UNT Dallas and has since served as president of the Student Veterans Association and currently serves as parliamentarian for the Student Government Association. He is also an active member of our campus activities board. Desmond, given the scope of where we are as a country in dealing with systemic racism, how are you dealing with your own grief and anger, and what protective factors have you adopted for yourself?
Thank you, Dr. Chappell. In dealing with my own grief and anger, I realized that I don't think that I've ever allowed myself to be angry. I think that I just kind of took it in stride and just kind of thought that it is what it is. You know, I'm just a Black man in America, and this is just kind of the situation. And I never really felt like there was really much I could do about it. You know, I just kind of try to prevent myself from being put in that situation. I was told early on by my mom to make sure that, you know, that I basically that I knew how I would be treated in America as a Black man. So I think like the coping mechanisms that I use is that you know, in situations with police or with others, I just try to take like the most logical standpoint, you know, say what needs to be said, and for the most part, just do what I'm told, honestly. So that's about it.
Yeah, so often our, Black men and women, when they're children, parents have to give that talk about how, when confronted in situations with police or people who are in a position of authority, how you are supposed to respond. So I appreciate you sharing your experience. Up next, we have Paula Beardie. Paula is the Associate Director of Campus Support Services, and she's an adjunct professor in the psychology department. She's a native of Dallas, Texas, and has spent her entire adult career in higher education. Paula has a master's degree in industrial organizational psychology and is a proud wife and mom of 3 girls. Outside of work, she spends her time running her own dance company in Duncanville, Texas, and serves as a proud member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. Paula, when you think about the systemic racism and generational trauma, do you think protesting helps or hurts? And what coping mechanisms have you used to deal with the constant recurrence of social injustice trauma?
Thanks, Dr. Chappell. I appreciate that. I think protesting absolutely helps. That's one of the quickest ways to get your voice heard and to be seen amongst many different groups of people. However, I think we need to be careful in putting a one-size-fits-all approach to protesting. I think we can be most effective when we use our gifts, our own lane, and how we protest. So whether it's you want to create a film that talks about systemic racism in our country, if you want to create a poem, I think different people can be affected by many different mediums that we use in far as protesting. And most importantly, using your status, your position, your privilege to protest and create new policies and laws that debunk the systemic racism. And to the second part of your question regarding the coping mechanisms I've used, the first one was because I was extremely angry, and I was not okay, I decided to limit the amount of news and social media I look at. And I'm still doing that. But something else, I'm kind of shift my focus to what I could control. The things that happened, I could not control, and I was angry about that. So I shifted my focus to what I could control. So I took this opportunity as a way to educate my daughters. You know, let's talk about, what does Juneteenth mean? Let's talk about the prison system. Let's talk about the N-word and the history about that. I also looked at, how am I spending my money, you know, and changing my focus to what I can control, as far as what businesses am I going to support. I want to support Black-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and businesses that are standing with us in saying that this is wrong. And so that's kind of how I've coped in this situation.
Yeah, you know, we're going to get into some further discussion about coping mechanisms as we continue to move through our discussion today. But, you know, I would also say that, you know, coping is unique to the individual, unique to the individual's experiences. And so how we deal with that is relative. And I appreciate you. I definitely appreciate you sharing. We'd also want to talk a little bit about the trauma aspects and resilience. So we have here Dee Goins. Dee is a native of St. Louis, Missouri, and he currently serves as the Director of Residence Life, Housing, and Conference Services here at UNT Dallas. Dee holds a bachelor's degree in speech communication, a master's degree in higher education administration, and he's currently pursuing a doctoral degree in higher education leadership. Before coming to UNT Dallas, Dee lived in San Francisco, California, and worked at Santa Clara University in residence life. Dee, if you would, talk a little bit about how your experience with racism has influenced your personal resilience.
Thank you, Dr. Chappell. For me, it's about bouncing back and realizing that those moments are not what define me, and keeping in the forefront of my mind that I am greater than that, and that there's always room for education. To those who demonstrate that type of behavior, should we have to always educate? Not at all. But for me, in terms of bouncing back, it's my contribution to the problem. If I can educate one person, and then they're able to educate one person, and then we create this cycle of education around why you said what you said is not appropriate, or that's racism, or why you did what you did, that's an act of racism. So for me, it's about the education piece, and knowing and keeping it in the forefront of my mind and daily experiences that somebody could have said something or done something to me, but at the end of the day, I have greater goals to accomplish. And so I just keep going forward. Not to say that those things don't hurt or sting, but as Desmond alluded to earlier, it's this kind of, it is what it is type of situation up until now. And I think things are going to change, and that change is happening. But it's ingrained to continue on with your life and move forward and continue on with the mission for yourself. So for me, it's been about staying on track to reach my goals, and staying on a mission of educating others to a comfortable capacity, so that we can stop those trends or those experiences of other people.
Thank you, Dee. When I think about my own experience with racism, I have to go all the way back to my first grade teacher, and what that particular individual said to me forever stayed in the front of my mind. It drove every aspect of my ability to rise above the hateful words, rise above what I was labeled as, to be able to move forward and find my own success and my own resilience. And when I had the opportunity to have an interaction with that individual many years later, and to be able to voice that I thanked her for those words, because it was the single most significant driving force for all of my educational and professional success. And so, you know, again, how people encounter racism, it's unique to the individual. What's being said from someone with regard to whatever their racist remarks are, and then how people choose to move forward, be resilient, and rise above that. We're going to talk more about what that also looks like as we continue to move forward in our discussion today. And hopefully those who are listening will find something helpful and meaningful that will come out of it. And so when thinking about, you know, when you are a younger person and what you knew then versus what you know now, I would like for us to talk a little bit more about that. So let me introduce Shanice Miller. Shanice serves as our Assistant Director of the Graduate School here at UNT Dallas, and she is also our Staff Council President, where she, along with her executive team, represents and advocates on behalf of all UNT Dallas and College of Law staff members. Shanice has been a higher education professional for 12 years and is currently pursuing her doctoral degree in higher education leadership and policy. A self-published author, motivational speaker, and podcast host, Shanice believes in and uses her platforms to empower and equip everyone with the necessary tools to become successful, informed, and educated in every area of their lives. Shanice is a change agent, community activist, and social justice advocate, and is dedicated to enhancing the world around her. Shanice, based on who you are now and what you know now, how would you encourage the heart of the younger version of yourself when you experienced racism for the first time?
Dr. Chappell, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, I have conversations with my younger self all the time. I thank her for getting me to where I am today. But in regards to the question, I would tell her to use discernment. Not every response or not every reaction deserves a response. There were many times when I was faced with racism and I responded, not because the situation didn't deserve a response, but because I was allowing the opinions and the thoughts of other people to dictate how I acted during that time. And what I know now is that people are powerless without your reaction. That doesn't mean that when you're faced with these things that you shouldn't respond. But what it does mean now for me is that I use wisdom and discernment in these situations to make sure that I maintain the power, because they don't have the power unless you give it to them. I would also tell my younger self to don't internalize what people say about you, the attacks, especially when they don't know you. How they treat you has nothing to do with you. That always speaks more to the character of that person than it does to you. What I do know also now is that a lot of the mannerisms and the behaviors that I have is based off of how I was raised. You know, my grandmother, my parents, any adult figure would not allow me to act a certain way. So when people would treat me a certain way or I was faced with racism, I now know that it has a lot to do with how they were raised. You know, I do not allow it to dictate me or to define me. Again, it speaks more about them than it does about me. But the younger Shanice, because I'm an only child and only grandchild as well, I'm always in survival mode because it's always just me, you know. So my initial instinct or reaction is to respond. But I do know that I now always am in control and have the power, and that I don't always have to accept an invitation to foolishness. You know, I don't. I can decline it, and I decline it with my silence. Now, when I feel like there's a situation that needs for me to respond, more so to educate and inform the individual, I'll do so. But now I use discernment in situations, and I would tell younger Shanice to use discernment. But because I didn't, I also don't use that or look at that as a negative, because I learned from that and I grew from that. And so now at 34 years old, I'm able to use those experiences and really, really help not only myself, but other people who may have, you know, who may be in that situation. So that's what I would tell younger Shanice.
We appreciate that, Shanice. That I think what you said was just so powerful. You know, not giving power to words that don't truly define you is so critical about how we begin this process, and be able to be empowered to move forward and live our best self, you know, in terms of who we are and how we conduct ourselves. I think that what you said was just so powerful. But it doesn't negate the fact that you also talked about, you know, this idea about not internalizing. Unfortunately, you know, we've had so many African Americans who have, in fact, experienced this concept of generational trauma, who haven't been able to move outside of that. Why? Because there is this constant reintroduction year after year, and sometimes month after month, of social injustice that does occur. And you know, how then are we able to move past that trauma? And I think, you know, what we're going to talk about next is just looking at that trauma narrative. And so I'd like for Teresa, and let me introduce Teresa. Teresa serves as a counselor in the Department of Counseling and Wellness. She provides counseling services to undergraduate and graduate students, as well as assists in the planning and execution of our wellness programs. Teresa has her bachelor's degree in Mexican American Studies from the University of Texas at Austin. She also holds a master's degree in community counseling from UNT Dallas. Her clinical areas of interest are depression, grief and loss, stress, anxiety, crisis management, relationship issues, trauma recovery, and academic concerns. Teresa, when you think about this concept of generational trauma, and of course how we are coping with generational trauma, how do we start the process of changing the trauma narrative?
Thank you, Dr. Chappell, for this question. So this is the work that I do on a regular basis. This is my full-time job, is working in trauma recovery. And I just want to say out loud that the students that I work with and the population that we serve already comes to our university with layers upon layers of trauma based on community violence, relationship violence, I mean, just a series of violence. And then within the last, historically, you add on these layers of discrimination, racism, and the recent killings of unarmed Black men and women in the community. There's just this ongoing exposure to trauma in our community. And so this is me saying out loud that the responsibility for changing the trauma narrative, I don't think belongs to the people who are experiencing the trauma. Changing and starting to change the trauma narrative belongs to people like myself, who are allies, who devote their life to speaking out against injustice, who you know, who are our colleagues on our campus. And so this is me calling out to folks that look like myself and who don't look like me, who look like you and who don't look like you, to do the heavy lifting during this time. And we start with giving an opportunity, excuse me, for the narrative to just be created, to be shared, and to be validated. And what I mean by that is that, unfortunately, if you've noticed anything about social media lately, and Paula kind of spoke to this earlier, there's so many negative messages that are happening right now where people's experiences are being invalidated. And people want to share their stories, and people want to talk about the things that they've experienced. And we are not allowing them to do that. We are silencing people on a daily basis by saying no, but, and this wouldn't happen if, and that's not okay. So we have to create a space. We have to create an environment where we can create the narrative first of all, and then share it and feel safe to share it, and then validate that, and help people make sense of those experiences. I was probably in my college years when I realized, and I started really thinking about my own experiences of racism and discrimination, and I did not put a name to those things until I was around that old. And thanks to the background and the work that I did in my bachelor's in the Mexican American Studies program, I became very aware of the history of Mexicans in Texas and the discrimination and the policies and the laws that kept people that look like me from going to certain schools and chasing certain education and working in certain jobs and things like that. So another thing that I want to say is that trauma in and of itself takes power from people. It is an experience that causes fear, uncertainty, anger, anxiety, and those are very powerless feelings. And so we give power back to communities. We give power back to the people that we're working with by inviting them to share those lived experiences, to invite them to tell us their story without any buts, ifs, ands, and just, you know, sit and say, I hear you, I see you, I am with you. Listening to understand and not to react. So I encourage anyone who's listening to this right now, and whoever's watching, from all the way at the top in administration to all the way down in advising and in the registrar's office and our faculty members and our students, that whenever someone tells you their story, their narrative, that you do your best to not dismiss it with a but or an or an and. Yeah, that's, and also I just want to say, when I said that the responsibility falls on those that are not Black or that do not belong to a marginalized community, it starts with educating yourself. Do not expect that community to educate you on what you should know. We have so many platforms to educate yourself on racial bias, to educate yourself on discrimination and racism. Read. There's so many good books right now, starting from White Fragility to Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. Podcasts that have so many enlightening messages and encouraging messages, and so many documentaries right now on Netflix and Amazon Prime, that you have a responsibility to do the work in. And so this is me encouraging you to do that. And that's how we start to change the trauma narrative. We have to hold space for it.
Thank you, Teresa. Yes, so critical. Education, awareness, being intentional about not listening to respond or immediately react, but being thoughtful and insightful and deliberate about listening for understanding. So critical to the work of really helping to shift that trauma narrative for real change. I'd like, again, in thinking about this concept of trauma, for us to talk a little bit about these kinds of coping mechanisms. What are the healthy coping mechanisms to deal with, generational trauma or trauma associated with social injustice? We have with us Dr. Shonda Riley. She currently serves as the Assistant Director of Counseling and Wellness Services. She has her bachelor's in psychology from UCLA, her master's in social work from Cal State, Long Beach, and she has a doctoral degree in counselor education and supervision from A&M Commerce. Prior to working at UNT Dallas, Dr. Riley was the program director for Youth Empowerment Services at the Child and Family Guidance Center in Dallas, Texas. She has over 20 years of experience in working in the mental health field as both a licensed clinical social worker and licensed professional counselor. Her clinical areas of interest are depression, grief and loss, stress, anxiety, crisis management, relationship issues, anger management, and academic concerns. Dr. Riley, thank you so much for being with us. When you think about the constant recurrence of grief, trauma, anger, and stress, and the holistic toll it can have on our overall well-being, what do you believe are healthy coping mechanisms to address these types of emotive responses?
Thank you, Dr. Chapter. That's a very good question, and I'd be more than happy to share some healthy coping mechanisms, especially during this time. But first, I would like to stress the fact that everyone deals with or cope with stress and violence and anxiety in very different ways. So it's really important for you to identify what healthy coping mechanisms for you, because what may work for one person may not necessarily work for another person. So I think that would be definitely be an important start. But in sharing my thoughts on some healthy coping mechanisms, one, definitely surrounding yourself by positive individuals, ones that are going to speak positivity into you, that's going to support you and what your thoughts and feelings are, and allow you to feel and to believe and express what you're going through during that challenging time where you may be experiencing stress, anxiety, or maybe even being a victim of yourself from injustice and or racism. Another recommendation for a healthy coping mechanism, I believe Dr. Chappell and Paula have already mentioned this, is limiting your time being spent on social media and watching the news. Yes, it's important to know what's going on around you and in the world, but when you hear and see a lot of negativity, it tends to sink in, and then that becomes your mentality and your reality. And so by limiting that will help you to move yourself into a more positive space where you can go through and address how you're feeling and what's the best way to move forward with whatever is going on. Another recommendation would be, just to spend some time by yourself, with yourself, and that could be through and during that time, just really reflecting on how the current situation is impacting you, what that looks like for you, what that means for you. You can do that through journaling as well, if you like to journal, and just to kind of get your thoughts out on paper and to really reflect upon your feelings and your thoughts, and really just sitting with that, and most importantly, knowing that your thoughts and feelings are just as important as the next person. And because someone else responds in one way to a situation does not mean that that's the only and the proper or correct way to respond. Value yourself. That's very important, and paying attention to yourself when you're doing that reflection. Another suggestion would be to look at things that interest you, and engulf yourself into those things, to those positive things. That could be exercising, it could be reading a book, it could be listening to music, it may even involve communicating with loved ones, a best friend, but just really recognizing where your happy place is and spending time there. Because you do deserve it, because we do face challenging times, not just with what we're going through today. We've had experiences in the past, and I'm sure that we will have some challenging times in the future as well. And another recommendation for a positive coping mechanism is, if you don't have someone that you feel that you trust, that you feel comfortable in sharing your thoughts and feelings with, you can always reach out to a counselor. That's what we are here for. And we are caring and loving individuals, and we would want to support you in any way that we can as counselors, whether it's a counselor in the community, or if you're a student, you're a counselor on campus, and just having, again, a safe place to be able to talk about not just what's going on, but how it's impacting you. And also being with an ally who can help you come up with ways to cope and to deal with and with what's going on. So again, those are some recommendations for some healthy coping mechanisms. And again, just remember, it's not, someone mentioned this before, it's not a one size fit all. So really pay attention to who you are and what's important for you and what you need to do for yourself to move forward and to deal with these challenging and changing times.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Riley. Yeah, listen, I think it's critically important for people to be aware. A lot of the time, all of the time, I would encourage everybody, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay, and sometimes not necessarily know what do I need for myself in this moment. So I do agree, spending some of that quiet time where it's just you, where you are able to do your own self reflection and introspection into what is it that I need? How am I checking into my own feelings? What am I noticing about myself right now that I may need help with? And then really being able to focus in on trusting and reaching out to those allies who can help support you in utilizing the coping mechanisms that you talked about is so critically important, Dr. Riley. Thank you for sharing that. I want to go back for just a second. And, Teresa talked a little bit about the education and awareness that people can have when it comes to educating oneself on what can you do. Paula, let me go to you for just a second. What would you say to those that express, I feel like I don't have a place to say anything, or like I can't be helpful? What are your thoughts about that?
That's a good question. Well, first I think we are always communicating something. And I think I've said this in classes before. Even if you don't physically have anything to say out of your mouth, silence is one of the most impactful ways of communicating. And so I think that it's appreciated more for someone to, and it takes a lot of courage for someone to come out and say, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do in this point. I need some guidance. What can I do? And like Teresa was saying earlier about, this is a great time to educate. And not only is it a great time to educate, but it also takes a mindset change. And yes, you can feel like, I don't know what to do, but there's something you can do about it. You can educate yourself. And then there's a mindset change that goes into this whole systematic racism. While it has disproportionately affected Black lives and brown lives, it is a human issue. Right? It's a human issue. And so when you change your mindset into saying this is a human issue, then I think those feelings might change over time. In educating yourself, changing the mindset and not saying, well, this is their issue, and I don't feel like I have a stance because I'm not a part of this group. But no, this is a human issue. This affects everyone. And so I would say, educate yourself, and the next time, we know right from wrong. And when you see this, don't ignore it, don't avoid it, educate yourself about it, and then call it out in your family circles, in your friend circles, call it out. And if you don't know what to call it out, at least say, this isn't right. I don't know what to say, but I know this isn't right. And I think I would, and a lot of my friends and family, we would appreciate hearing that than nothing at all. That's my stance.
Thank you, Paula. Absolutely right. Calling it out is so important, and not sitting on the sidelines and pretending that it's not there. Again, I stressed at the beginning, having the courage not to walk around or not to operate oneself with an eyes wide shut mentality I think we have to be intentional about being ever cognizant that this stuff is happening. This is a part of the lives of so many people in America right now. And so, you know, having the courage to confront that is so critical and so necessary in terms of our ability to be able to move forward. I want to go back to Teresa for just a second to just provide those who are listening with some resources that we have at the university and perhaps maybe externally. I know you mentioned a couple of books earlier, but what resources can the university provide or put in place that will help students, faculty, and staff to cope and channel emotions in a positive way going forward?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Chappell. Yes, I'd be happy to talk a little bit about what I think might be some helpful resources, and I'm you know, obviously willing to, if anybody else wants to add on to this, but I definitely think that more open and brave and honest dialogue like this, specifically when it's not in response to a tragedy, right? I think that it's important for us to have these conversations ongoing and not wait until something tragic has happened to address these things that are happening. I also think that we could benefit a lot as a community to have a resource page on our website with, I've seen so many things circling through Facebook, through Instagram, different you know, pages to follow and activists to follow and books to read and websites to get information from that I think would be really beneficial for us to have a tab on our website, you know, right now, especially with some of these resources available to our students, to our community. I am a proponent for trauma-informed services. So what that means for me is, you know, educating our faculty and staff on how to provide compassionate and empathetic services to our students, to where, again, going back to the message I said earlier, we're not being dismissive of a student when they say, you know, I was pulled over and I had a gun held to my head, or, you know, or I'm experiencing food insecurity due to systemic things that are happening in my community, but that it's heard and validated, and that the student is given the resources that they need to problem solve. I'm a very solution focused person, but first and foremost, I'm trauma informed, and I do my best to educate and provide compassion and empathy wherever it is needed, especially in cases where someone is being treated unfairly and is being discriminated against. This past summer, we opened up our student service, our student center, I'm sorry, and we have a brand new multicultural center that when I go in there is empty sometimes. And I think that not just Dr. Susan Harper, who oversees that area, but I think that we as a community have an obligation to our students to do some programming in there, to utilize the space adequately, to do some more, you know, intimate dialogues with our students, intimate dialogues with our staff and faculty, invite people to come and share their trauma narrative in a space like that and talk about what their experiences are, and, you know, across the board with all of our marginalized communities. And really just working on building confidence and trust to discuss how race impacts relationships and policies on campus. And that's not just for our students, but also for our staff and faculty. I've had faculty reach out to me, and I'm sorry, not faculty, staff, knowing that I'm this vice president for staff council as well. And they've been seeking resources and they've been seeking support because they feel as though they don't have anywhere to go to get support. And if maybe they were to share their experiences, that it wouldn't necessarily be something that would be validated. And so again, just going back to as a community building trust with one another, to have these open conversations around what are the problems and how do we solve them.
Absolutely. And, you know, to our students, to our faculty and our staff, as the person who oversees the student affairs area, I need your help. We need your help. The team needs your help. Yes, Teresa talked about our multicultural center. Yes, sometimes it's not quite as occupied as I would like for it to be, but I really want for it to become a dynamic space for our entire university community to be able to engage in and with all year long. So I want to invite those students who are interested, if this is your area and you want to have more of an interest and voice your concerns, but also provide ideas about what we can do better, differently in this area. If you have program ideas, that same invitation is extended to staff and faculty. We want you to be involved. We want you to be a part of our growing community, and we want to be better informed as a university community as well, particularly when we're dealing with issues of racism and social injustice. It's our responsibility. If our students come into this university and they leave the same way that they walked out, we have not done our job. And so I invite you all, please, 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 you can reach out to Dr. Susan Harper, you can reach out to Teresa, you can reach out to myself or any one of the staff who work in the student affairs area. We embrace your ideas and thoughts, and we want to be better, particularly as it relates to diversity, inclusion, in our multicultural programming environment. I would like to provide an opportunity for a final word. And right after this final word, we will open it up for any questions that have been posed in our Q&A section. But with this final word, I want to go back to Shanice Miller for just a second. Shanice, how, if you could, for our audience, how do you thrive past your pain and do what Gandhi calls us to do, which is to be the change?
Thank you so much, Dr. Chappell. Let me tell you how excited I was when you and I chatted yesterday about me being able to provide the final word, because I love Gandhi. Gandhi is quoted in my office at work. Gandhi is quoted in my office at home. Gandhi is just a scholar, and his schools of thought have always guided me in many different areas. And this quote happens to be one of my favorites. So I was so excited about providing the final word that I actually jotted down notes. So if you see me look down, that's because I was really excited and I wanted to make sure that the words that I provided were not only final, but lasting, and that they leave an impression on anyone who is listening, on anyone who is watching. And so from that quote, Dr. Chappell, I came up with 3 points per se, if you could. Purpose, position, and power. In order to be the change, in order to create the change that Gandhi is calling us to do and to be, you have to know who you are. There's no way that you can really affect change, and there's no way that you can really create lasting change if you do not know who you are, if you do not have a sense of purpose with who you are, to understand that you were created with solutions on the inside of you, and to know that you can fulfill your purpose. You have to have you have to know who you are and your identity so that you can fulfill your purpose. And it's also important when we're talking about purpose to surround yourself around people who are genuine, people who are honest, people who are going to help you grow, people who are not yes people, because if you're always around yes people, then you will always be the same. If we are to achieve what Gandhi has called us to do, then you have to know who you are. You have to know your purpose. Number 2, position. Look at where you're positioned, whether it's at your job, in the classes, whether it's your major for the students who are watching. Your position is important in order for you to affect the change that Gandhi is talking about. Use your platforms, which is why I included in my bio. Use the positions and the spaces and the places that you occupy. Use those for good. Educate your community. One of the things that I really love about being a first generation student is that I am able to provide all of the things that I did not know whenever I went to college. I literally look for people to say, hey, did you know about this? Hey, did you know about that? I don't think that people should have to necessarily come and ask me because they know that I work in higher ed. I create those opportunities. I use my position with my job and my platforms and my podcasts and all the other spaces that I occupy. I literally use those to get to people first, to give them, to educate them on what it is that they need to know. And Dr. Chappell, something that you just said, which is something that I actually wrote down, is that education is transformative. Education is not just getting a bachelor's degree. And I know that to be true because all of the lessons that I learned the person that I am came from my family members and my great grandmothers and my grandmothers who never received a degree, but they were so educated and they were so intentional about teaching us and raising us right. That is education. It's transformative. You should not be the same when you leave. You should leave with more than just a degree. You should not leave the same way. That also includes your problem solving skills. That includes financial literacy when we're talking about the Black community. And unfortunately, being a Black woman, I know this to be true. You have to bring more to the table than just a degree, which is why education is transformative. Right? So you have to bring more than just a degree. So when you are in a position to create the change, you have to use your position to make sure that you are transforming lives, which is a part of our university's mission statement, to make sure that we are transforming the lives of the students and the communities that we serve. So that's position. Power, which is my favorite one, because everybody's power is different and it looks different, but power is so impactful and power has such a place, especially for right now. Understanding how powerful you are during this time. There's power in your voice. There's power in this panel. There's power in who you are. There's power in your experiences, which is why I wrote the book that I did, because and also because I wanted to make sure that young women who looked like me, who experienced some of the life traumas, some of the things that I went through, I wanted to give them a voice and to make sure and to let them know that you're not the only one, that I've gone through some of the things that you've gone through, and let me help you, let me show you how I was able to move past them. Mentorship is important. Mentorship is powerful. Right? I've spent the last 8 years of my life every Tuesday night mentoring young girls at my church, grades 9 through 12, for the last 8 years of my life, because I understand how important mentorship is, to not only have somebody who may not be your parent, but they look like you and they have some shared experiences, and you can really, really get to the heart of what it is that they need. Mentorship is so powerful. And Teresa, just kind of going back to a resource, that could be a structured resource that we could definitely include going forward, having a mentorship program, because it is so powerful to have a mentorship program. And one of the things that I really love about Gandhi is I always saw him as a midwife. I know that he didn't birth a lot of the people that he helped to deliver, but it was equally as important that he delivered people and delivered situations into their destiny. And so I look at that the same way as an educator, almost like we're midwives. We don't necessarily physically birth our students, but we love them like they are our own. But it is also just as important that we help them get to their destiny and to the next level of their life, just like a midwife does whenever she helps the mom deliver the baby. So that's power. That's power. And during this time, like I said, this is an important time to really, really, really utilize our power. And you can become that change that you want to see. Knowing your purpose, using your position for positive and progression, for positive progression, and to unleash your power. Unleash your power until my most favorite, Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Unleash your power until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream."
That, ladies and gentlemen, is speaking knowledge to power. I thank you all so much. We're gonna cruise over here and take some questions that have come through. And I will just open it up for any one of my panelists here who would like to respond. Our first question that we have is, I'm often at a loss on how to channel emotions. Can you recommend ways to find organizations or groups that work toward racial harmony where I can feel I am using my voice in a positive way? Who would like to take that question? Sorry, who did someone? Shanice, was that you that raised it?
Desmond.
Oh, Desmond. Desmond, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know if the question is specifically about like the school or outside of the school, but I know that there I don't know too many places that were outside of the school, but I know like at the college there are groups like the ones that I'm in, SGA, SVA, and I know even though it says Student Veterans Association, that doesn't mean that we're like we push anybody else away. I mean, we have experiences that I think a lot of people don't have, but we're very open to talking to a lot of the students who aren't veterans. Like I said, SGA, it's a mixed bag of a lot of people. There's also the opportunity to start your own group. If you don't see the group, create the group. And I didn't know that there was a quote from Gandhi, but I know in the military we always say, "Be the change you want to see." So you know, sometimes it starts with you. If you feel like the organization or the group isn't there, then create it. You know, I mean, I think that's how like a lot of great organizations got started. NAACP, different sororities and fraternities, which is also another option, something to look into. So it's just those are plenty of options. So I don't know if you all know any outside options, but that's what I could think of.
Thank you, Desmond. Teresa, go ahead.
Thank you, Desmond, and thank you, Dr. Chappell. So as Desmond was talking, I'm going to plug kind of something that the Counseling and Wellness Center is doing this summer. We have a Worry Free Wednesday group that is available on Wednesdays starting the 17th, so next week, a week from today at 4 p.m. What transpired during the spring semester is that we had this series set up to, to happen on campus, and then we were sent home due to COVID. And as a result, the latter half of our sessions centered around COVID. And what I see happening and what my hope is to use that as a space for us to continue to talk about that and the impact of everything else that's going on, right? To have open and honest dialogue, the dialogue that I said we needed, right? About racism on and off campus, to talk about how these things in the media are impacting us. So I welcome any student that would like to join us on Wednesdays. There, if you don't follow us on Instagram, it's UNTD_counseling_wellness. Feel free to follow us there. You can have get the information you need and get the link to be able to access that. On top of that, speaking of Instagram, in the last few days, I've started to follow several organizations in the Dallas area that, due to COVID, are still offering their workshops and things like that virtually, and they're going live on their Instagram feeds. And so that's been a huge source of the information that I'm getting, is from following agencies and things like that on camp in the community in Dallas area. So I recommend for sure that you maybe do a search through your Instagram feed and start following some of those organizations and tune in to their live sessions that they have.
Thank you, Teresa. Do we have anyone else that wanted to comment? Okay. I think in some ways we've addressed this next question, but the next question is a little similar. What can we as students do to be part of the initiatives that help our diversity and environment succeed? Does anybody want to add to that? Paula, jump in there. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Just adding on to what Desmond and Teresa said, joining, the organizations and joining groups within the Counseling and Wellness Department to talk. We can join these organizations and join these groups and then fall into a groupthink situation where someone says anything, and because I'm part of this organization, this group, and I want everyone to get along, I'm not going to hold anyone accountable for anything that's happening. And so I would say to make sure that we continue to move this initiative forward and to continue to have our, the diversity on our campus and our culture succeed, and for there to be inclusion as well as diversity, is to remember, like Shanice said, your position and your power, and hold people accountable. Hold the people in your organizations accountable. If something does not seem right, if you know it's not right, if this is not helping to forward our agenda at all, then call it out. Call it out. Not just you as students have power to change the way our campuses are running. And so also there's accountability that you can hold there as well. And so just to remember, and I'm going to just keep quoting exactly what Shanice said because it was so good. Remembering your position and your power when you join these organizations, if you're already in organizations, speak out, because again, you can be the change that we need. But if you join these organizations and these groups and you become comfortable and you feel like I don't want to rock the boat, some things, you can let slide, and you're not helping us in this movement that there has always been a movement. So I don't want to say this movement that has been birthed, but this movement that has been reignited. So, yeah.
Do we have anybody else who would like to respond? Oh, Shanice, go ahead.
Yes. All right. I just really kind of want to emphasize what Desmond and Teresa and Paula has said, and to speak to students, staff, faculty, whoever's listening. Now is a unique time to create intentional programs, groups, whatever, to meet our needs, whatever needs that we have right now, to help us go forward. Like Desmond said, it may not exist. And if it doesn't exist, that's fine. Let's create something to meet the need intentionally, to really get to the heart of what it is that we need as an institution, a student, staff, or whoever, and then go forward. As tragic as everything has been going on around us, one of the things that I found that has been beautiful, if you will, is the fact that there's so much opportunity to say, look, this is how things are going to be going forward. Enough is enough. So here's my need. Here's what needs to happen. Here's what needs to happen in order for me to be successful, in order for this to keep running. This is what needs to happen. And so students, especially students, because we're definitely here for you, tell us what that looks like, because I graduated high school in 2004. Shout out to the class of 2004. I graduated high school in 2004. So my needs then may not be the same as yours, and me meeting your needs may not be the same as how I would need my needs to be met. So you have to be vocal, and you have to tell us exactly what it is that you need. Staff as well, you guys know that Teresa and I, exec team, we're here for you. This is the time to make change, to make intentional change, and to really address the needs that we have as an institution.
Thank you, Shanice. Well, we have reached the end of our time for this discussion. I just want to say thank you so much to each and every one of our panelists on this discussion today. Thank you for once being courageous enough to speak your truth, but also in your willingness and your mentorship and leadership to want to provide additional tools and resources that are necessary to further empower our university community. I am so grateful to you and grateful for your time. To those who are watching, I'd say to you, please join us again Friday, June 12th, as the university continues the dialogue with a focus on changing the narrative. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon, and continue with the rest of your day. Thank you all very much.